Hello, everybody. I want to pick up for a moment on where Richard left off with using the, construction funds to equip or outfit the building. What I remember then is extending that. The next logical thing is that if you're going to put terminals out in departmental offices, they're going to be connected to wires back to the mothership building. Obviously, that's just an extension of that construction, so that was a semi-legitimate excuse for spending those kinds of funds. Well, Richard said that he agonized for weeks about this, and I didn't, I compressed all my agonizing into just several hours. But after hearing all these wonderful stories, and most especially seeing that timeline, I think that's just fantastic. I think Elizabeth said she did it, but Philip, Elizabeth, Claudia, whoever, all of you, thank you so much. That's just great. I really enjoyed looking at that, and was reminded of a lot of things. And as a result of that, I think that I'm going to stop, or just drop some of the drier comments that I had prepared about what all we did, and I'll do some of that, but I want to tell a few stories as well. And also skipping around a little bit, Richard was talking about the experience with Doug Leonard flying. Richard and I, neither one were particularly fond of flying, and I remember one time we were scheduled to fly somewhere to a conference, and I guess we probably had been talking about it and got fed on each other's concerns. And so the morning, I think, before we were supposed to go, he said, Coy, I had the strangest dream last night. He said, I dreamed that we were on this plane, we were flying wherever it is, and we flew into a massive sandstorm, and he said, I became convinced that the plane was upside down. The plane was flying upside down, that the pilot didn't know it, and I was just terrified. And I said, well, thank you for telling me that. Let me tell you what I dreamed. So that night I had dreamed that we made it to our destination, went to the conference, and when we went to get ready to leave and head back, you know how strange dreams can be. Well, we were just about to board the plane, and I discovered that I'd forgot my shoes and left them back at the hotel. so Richard said, well, go back and get them. So I rushed back to try to get my shoes, and by the time I got back, well, Richard had boarded the plane, and it had taken off, and we got the word back that the plane had been hijacked. And I was just pacing the floor thinking, oh my gosh, I sure hope it comes back. I sure hope they get that plane back. And if it does, Richard's going to kill me for not being there with him. So, anyway, well, I didn't spend the entire 50 years at, in UNT computing. The first couple of years, from 62 to 64, I was all somewhere else getting the experience that I was going to need when I got here, I guess. In summer of 1964, I was working for General Dynamics, it's now Lockheed Aircraft, a big bomber plant down in Fort Worth, technically White Settlement. This was actually I was a computer programmer at that time for GD, and this was my second stint of working there, actually. I had been to GD previously as a tab machine operator, operating these punch card systems. We had humongous, gigantic files to support that aircraft manufacturing process and all the administrative things that went along with it. In the interim, I had worked for Bell Helicopter. I started when I left GD as a tab machine operator. I went over to Bell as a tab machine operator with the promise that they would put me into computer operations as soon as possible, and they also agreed to sponsor me to an IBM programming school, which they did. And so over time, I did move from tab machine operations, computer operations, got into computer programming, and then General Dynamics got a new contract. They remembered me, called me up, and made me a really good offer. I needed the money, and I'm sure you can all identify with that at one time or another, so I went back to GD. And one of my co-workers there, after I'd been there for some time, a year or so, was I think he was just finishing his degree here at North Texas State, and he he had a job at GD and was commuting on a daily basis, and he told me that he'd heard a rumor that there was going to be some sort of an opening in in their data processing, which is what he thought they called it at the time, and that he thought I might be interested in it. It seemed like it's something he thought would suit me. So I didn't know much about NTSU at the time, and I'd never been to Denton even, so I drove up and looked around and kind of liked what I saw, but I couldn't figure out how to apply for the job or even verify that it existed because there was no HR or personnel department at the time. But I think I went to the ad building and somebody pointed me to Richard Harris down in the College of Business. Now, I don't remember if I found him and Jerry that first day or if I called and made an appointment, but eventually they interviewed me. And I remember it was a joint interview between the three of us in this building down at the other end. And I know I felt quite comfortable with these guys, and I thought, I believe I would fit in here fine, at least with these two guys. And I tried to emphasize my analytical skills and my programming abilities, programming the 1400 series, which is what they had bought for the administration building. And I don't know whether Richard realized this at the time or not, but as it turned out, when I got here, the skills that I needed much worse were handling those large card files, and being a tab machine operator, because I found out, I guess, at that time the difference between what's important and what's urgent. Something that's urgent is important with a very short deadline. And when we got here, everything was urgent. Converting those systems to run on the computer was important, but it wasn't urgent. I don't remember if it was on the first interview or whatever. I do remember that when Richard said he had made the choice that he'd like to offer me the job, he said I need to go interview with Dr. Matthews. Dr. Matthews had a well-earned reputation for keeping a close watch on everything, including hiring at the university. And so went up and met Dr. Matthews with Richard, and I guess it must have gone okay because they offered me the job. And then Richard sprang a little, reasonable sounding surprise on me. He said, fall registration starts in just about 2 days. I told him I needed to negotiate an end time with my current employer down at GD. But he said, fall registration starts in just a few days. And he said, it's a huge job. And, you really need to kind of experience that, and we could use the help. Now, I'll take a minute to try to explain what fall registration is like. We were using punch cards, and we would punch a deck of cards for students. There was a schedule card called a yellow top card, and then some other cards that they hand wrote information for the dean of students and religious preference for some of the churches that they don't ask about now, and other things. And the students took that deck of cards called a card packet. Those cards were in an envelope, and then in the registration process, they physically went around to the academic departments to find the subject, course, and section number that they wanted to take. And they would ask to register for that class. If the department approved, they would give them the card, and it would be put in the card packet. So they would go through that process. It's a little more complicated than it sounds, but when it would end up, they would wind up with that yellow top or schedule card, followed by maybe, typically on the average about 5 cards for the courses they were going to be taking. And then they had to go through a process. At that time, that registration would typically end in the College of Business, and Jerry and his crew would take those cards because the schedule card identified the student, the class card identified the classes, but there was nothing about the student punched into the class card. So they went through what was called a reproducing punch, and a process called gang punching. The machine would recognize each schedule card and then punch the student number into the subsequent class cards till it hit a next card, a next schedule card. Then after that, the cards had to be separated down, separate out the student card from the class cards. Well, Richard said, you need to come up and help us with this for, a couple of hours in the evening if you can. So I said, sure. Well, 2 or 3 days passed, and I left GD and, drove the 30 miles or so up here, and found Richard and Jerry, and Richard said, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you. Boy, what you need to do is take this whole bunch of trays of cards on a two-wheeler and cart them across campus and into the ad building and down the stairs into the basement." And I guess they gave me the keys. I don't know, but I know about midnight it was kind of a spooky place. Carting those cards across campus and down in what seemed to be the dungeon of the administration building. And so I thought, I'm not really sure this is what I signed up for. And I thought about it, and I hated to, but I thought, I'm going to tell Richard tomorrow. I'm going to come up and I'm going to tell him, I really don't think that this is exactly what I had in mind. So the next day, I went home, got a few hours sleep, went back to GD, did whatever I had to do that day, drove back up here, found Richard, and he said, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you. Here's what we need to do tonight." I just didn't have the heart, plus I couldn't get him to stand still long enough to tell him that I just didn't think I wanted to do that. So I thought, well, I'll help him out tonight. I know how to do this at least, and I'll tell him tomorrow. So that went on long enough that eventually registration was over, and it didn't seem quite so bad. And I never had told him that I didn't want the job, and I never had told GD that I was not going to quit. So we just went ahead and let it stand like that. So I was, I guess a part of me really wanted to stay because, or else I would have found some way to have left him a note or something.
And I didn't find out about this for it seemed like years later.
I didn't tell Richard that a long time ago. A story that Ray Sanders told me having to do with card packets that I'll repeat if you don't mind, Ray, was that in about 1970 when we got to 360 Model 50, we were in need of a computer operations manager. And the same guy that had told me about the job up here in North Texas, I don't remember why I was in contact with Don. His name was Don McCarty. But he said, well, I know I go to church with a guy that's a really good guy that's got that kind of a job at TI, Texas Instruments. You ought to contact him. And so I did. Now that was not my position. It was in Jerry's area. But I contacted Ray and I said, why don't you think about this? And so Ray was telling me this a while ago, just reminded me, I'd kind of forgotten it. But he said he came up here and he interviewed with Jerry. And Jerry was stuffing those card packets in the envelope. That was a big deal. He said, all during the interview, you never stop. And so he said, he finally said, offered him the job. And Ray said, well, now, who am I supposed to work for? Do I work for you or do I work for Coy? And so Jerry said, well, since I hired you, I guess you probably ought to work for me. Well, anyway, as I said, I found out when I got here that, a couple of things. I learned the difference between what's important and what's urgent. I also found out that being responsible for the administrative data processing functions, that sounded really, that's pretty good, a lot of responsibility. Well, what really meant was if you look around and say who's going to do this job, whatever it is, and you don't see anybody else, then you get to do it. So that's the way it was with handling those cars, trucking them across campus and down the stairs. And I was doing a little bit of calculation, just thinking about those days, and I determined that our enrollment at that time was, give or take, about 12,000 students, about a third of what it is today. And so you would have had 12,000 of those student cards, and at 5 classes per student, you would have had about 60,000 class cards for a total of 72,000 cards. The time spent just to run those cards through a card sorter, they had a code punched in it, column 80, I think it was, so the machine could identify which are class cards and which are student schedule cards. Just to separate them into the two groups would take about 3 hours. I admit we didn't have the fastest card sorting machines that were available at the time. As a matter of fact, when Richard first showed me the tab machine over there, I thought surely this is the museum. But things did improve over time, but at that time I felt they were a little bit behind what I'd experienced at General Dynamics and Bell. But nonetheless, that was about a 3-hour job. And then to take those 12,000 student cards and sort them down on what was then a 5-digit student number so you could run them in the student number order, would have taken another couple of hours. And to run the class cards, sort them down into subject or department and course number, section number, took about 20 or 25 hours. And not only was it time consuming, it was also error prone because it's sort of a mind numbing job to sit there and feed those cards in. And it's real easy to forget about, did I just take this deck out? Steve Fisher said, no, he was a part-time student operator when I got here. And for years after that, he would always talk about, so you remember back when I hired you here? You know, and so anyway, it was, they were interesting times, put it mildly. The 1440 that they had purchased was really an awesome machine. And I say that because I don't remember how many times I've said, awesome! But, you know, it only had 4K of memory, and that was 4,000 characters. Was a 6-bit character, binary coded decimal, I believe, and that was all the room you had for your computer programs that you wrote and your data. There's no operating system, fortunately, so at least you did have all of that space, but that wasn't a great deal. It had a combined card reader and punch, and since systems were heavily dependent on those colors, you had to have ways to get the cards read in, and then you need to produce D-card files. But it was a combined card reader and punch, so you couldn't be punching at the same time you were reading cards with just one. It had a printer that was a little bit faster than the 402, but it was very unreliable. It had, instead of sticking the keys like Richard was talking about, it had a bar that was scooted back and forth and had segments of little teeth that had letters on them. And if the paper came up just right, those teeth on that printer would snag and then just pop out like popcorn, just like a shell out. And then if you weren't watching it, it'd just keep on printing. So it was really a terrible machine. I think that IBM must have needed to sell that machine a whole lot worse than North Texas needed to buy it, in my opinion. But it had 2 disk drives. Each of them had enough capacity to hold about 20,000 records. So one thing we would have loved to have done was just simply loading cards onto the disk drives and sort them so we can print a report and not have to physically sort those cards. And we could do that with smaller files, like a student file, 12,000 students. We could load them on and sort that. And that leads us to the time Richard brought Dr. Spurlock down to show him the magic of this machine sorting these card images. He said, the card images, as we load them on, they were on this disk, and it's sorted, and he's going to write them out over here, and they'll be in alphabetical order, or they'll be in student ID order, however he wanted. And Richard was just finished explaining all that, and I came along, and I was watching this, and I leaned on that disk drive, and all of a sudden it started to slow. And I realized that I'd pressed enough on the lid that it triggered a mechanism that it was open. So I thought, oh my goodness, will it pick back up? So I got off and sure enough, it was zoomed and everything seemed like it's going well. And Dr. Spurlock said, interesting, if true. Now, that's the only time I ever heard him say that. It might have been a common saying, but that's etched in my memory.
I remember Richard was shuffling his feet.
You were there too? Yeah. Well, anyway, so how did we use that machine? We couldn't sort the class roll on it because it didn't have enough disk capacity. But what we could do was use the printer on it. So for about the first, 2 years, the main thing we did was we would sort cards and to run them through the card reader and print a report. That was just about it. In 1966, according to the timeline and according to Claudia's history, we acquired Richard swung the deal. I don't remember where it came from. Might have been another state agency, but we got a 1401 computer, which was, by comparison, I mean, it was a giant leap forward. It had twice as much memory. It had a stunning 8K memory. It had a separate card reader and punch, so you could read cards and punch at the same time. It had a much faster and more reliable printer, and it had either 3 or 4 tape drives, which meant that we could load cards onto a magnetic tape of just about any size file you wanted, or could imagine, and sort them down to any sequence we needed and print reports from that tape. Bottlenecks from one place to another. You also find that the weakest, that any chain is no stronger than its weakest link. And at that time, the weak link was our electrical source. Because we discovered that sort took about 8 to 10 hours to complete. And we rarely ever had that much time go by without at least a couple of second power flicker, which would shut the machine down. So we invariably had to try 3 or 4 times to get that sort completed, sometimes more. We'd often leave it running overnight and come back in the morning anxiously to see did it finish sorting or did it die in the middle, and more often than not it died somewhere in the middle. But at least that allowed us to get started with doing some really significant things with computers rather than tab machines. Then in 1970 we bought the 36050, and one thing I remember about that is we took that trial I wanted to see was how long will it take to do that massive sort on the 36050. It was taking 8 to 10 hours on the 1401, and it took just mere minutes. At first I didn't believe that it had completed successfully. It must something went wrong, but it had, and I thought we could never possibly need a machine any faster than that. Never need another mainframe upgrade. Oh, how naive I was. And I think I will stop at that point in terms of the history. I do want to tell one more story at least. Sue Ann and I were looking at the timeline over there, and I think about 1983, it was a Shelby mainframe upgrade. And I was reminded that about this time, approaching Christmas holidays every year, not every year, but more often, it seemed like every year, I would always have been working on some sort of deal, trying to buy some expensive piece of equipment. And invariably, it seemed like we would get a stalemate with the company. They were not going to give on the point that we just had to have, either price or capabilities or conditions or whatever. And then, when they would realize that North Texas wasn't going to give in, and it was getting down to the end of their accounting year where they needed to make that sale, they'd say, well, okay, we will do this if you get the deal done by the end of the year. Well, the end of the year for us meant when the university shut down for Christmas, because you couldn't get people like Bill Demo or other administrators sign off because they were gone. And so we'd be rushing around while everybody else was eating their turkey and pie. Sue Ellen was frantically typing purchase orders, and she would put it sometimes to the machine that we already had sitting in the computer room. We'll let some into the room. Well, I think that's about winds it up. I think we're running past my time. I enjoyed the time. Thank you so much.